What's up, Jets fans? Welcome to the latest edition of Jets Latest, where you get the latest on the Jets, Jets. I'm your host, the spitting statistician, Dane Martinez, and we are now less than a week away from the NFL draft, where it's the only time of the year where all 32 teams in the NFL actually get better. We have been focused on the draft. I know everybody who subscribes and listens, and thank you to the over 1,000 people who have subscribed to Jets Latest. You know very clearly what I believe. I believe the hit rate on an offensive lineman in the top 10 is better than other positions that other people are mocking and talking about. It is very rare that you get a top 10 tight end that you actually need that kind of position of value, whereas the offensive line, especially where we are here trying to support a young developing quarterback in Justin Fields, and it would really complete the offensive line for the Jets. Remember, I talked about the strong interior offensive line here for the Jets, right? With Tippmann, with AVT, and Simpson all rating out as top 10 in their position in PFF. The first round pick last year, Olu Fashanu on left tackle. I think we drop in a right tackle. As everybody knows, I have been talking about Armand Membu out of Missouri, right? A guy that grades out at PFF over 90, a guy that has only given up 3 sacks in 3 years in Missouri, and I've been showing you how some of the odds across the sports book certainly agree, right? We have offensive line as the position the Jets will go with. We have Membu as now going not inside the top 5, but going inside the top 10 as per the odds. We have other guys like Ashton Genty, Mason Graham going inside the top 5 to teams that are probably above us, and the idea that now with the Derek Carr injury, how the Saints are maybe have more pressure to go ahead and get that quarterback, likely Shedeur Sanders, and may even trade up to go ahead and get him. When you consider guys like Abdul Carter, the edge rusher out of Penn State, when you consider Travis Hunter, the dynamic two-way player who won the Heisman Trophy out of Colorado, these are guys that are going to go up. I believe this goes ahead and actually makes the draft board fall in a way that is perfect for the Jets, where one of the top offensive linemen actually falls all the way to number 7. And here's the deal. There are a ton of mock drafts out there, and they are pretty much, I would say 90 to 95% of the mock drafts that I have seen have the Jets at number 7 going either Tyler Warren, the Penn State tight end, and most of that, I think, is because a lot of people thought the Jets were going to get Brock Bowers last year, right? He was mocked, but no. At that time, Joe Douglas decided to go with the offensive line. And then Brock Bowers had a huge season last year, right? Over 110 catches, doing things that most rookie tight ends have never done. So some of the wisdom was like, oh, the Jets missed out on Bowers last year, so they're going to not make that mistake again. I don't think that is the case, okay? I think they double down on the offensive line and go with Armand Membu, and that's what a lot of the mocks are saying as well. In fact, there is a new mock from Combine from Mel Kiper and Field Yates, Todd McShay, over at ESPN, and they do have the Jets taking Armand Membu at number 7 overall. So the mocks continue to agree with what I have been talking about here at Jets Latest. Remember, the Jets have a second round pick, which we've talked about a lot as well, at number 42 overall. I have been talking that this is where they get the tight end potentially, right? Because it's not Tyler Warren, in my opinion, at number 7. Instead, because I believe this is a deep tight end class with Tyler Warren and Colston Loveland out of Michigan, who's projected to also be a first-round pick. And then there are other guys that I think can turn into good NFL starters, right? And guess what? This new combined ESPN mock have the Jets going tight end in round 2 at number 42 overall. But they have them taking Elijah Arroyo out of Miami. I think he is still something of a raw prospect. He was riddled with injuries at Miami. They like his wingspan and things of that nature, but I actually believe there are better tight ends even after Warren and Loveland that could be there. One is Terrence Ferguson out of Oregon. This is a guy that has the Oregon Duck record for receptions and yards. And I've talked about Mason Taylor as another tight end, him out of LSU, the son of Hall of Fame edge rusher Jason Taylor, the nephew of Hall of Fame middle linebacker Zach Thomas, a guy who also set records at LSU catching the ball, all-time leader in receptions and yards as a tight end, and he only dropped one ball in all of last season. Okay, so I think those two guys are better than Arroyo. If Taylor is on the board and Arroyo is on the board, I actually hope the Jets go ahead and take Mason Taylor. But it does kind of suggest, again, that the Jets are interested in tight end with a high end draft capital. By the way, there's also another report of another way the Jets could go, but this would be after the draft. There is some rumblings now that Baltimore Ravens tight end Mark Andrews may be available in trade. We'll talk about that after the draft because none of these moves are going to happen before the draft, but keep an eye out on that as another way if the Jets decide to kind of pass on tight end altogether. Okay, Mark Andrews is a name we will talk about here on Jets Latest. But then here's the other thing. In some of the kind of moves that they have made, specifically bringing back Alan Lazard, right? I thought that wide receiver falls down the priority list in terms of where they're going to go. And I've been talking about defensive linemen, right? We've been talking about the Derek Harmons of the world, the Tyleek Williams of the world, the Darius Alexanders of the world, who all could be there. But this combined mock draft has the Jets going a little bit different in round 3 at number 73 overall. One of the guys I was talking about on D-line was out of Ole Miss, and it was Walter Nolan, right? However, this mock at number 73 overall has the Jets getting another member of the defensive line in Ole Miss, and not even J.J. Pegues, who I've been talking about. But check this out. What about Princely Umanmielen? He is an edge rusher, and he is someone that we have not actually talked about here on Jets Latest. So I did want to talk about him. Princely Umanmielen. He is 6'4", 244 pounds. Again, this Ole Miss defense was absolutely stout, right? We talked about Walter Nolan. We talked about J.J. Pegues. We've now talking about Umanmielen. And remember, also at the Pro Day, they were watching Trey Harris, the wide receiver. Many people thought they were watching Jackson Dart, the quarterback. I don't think they were watching Jackson Dart, right? But Umanmielen, all SEC edge rusher, and there is a ton of talent in the SEC. So to be first team all SEC definitely matters to something, right? 10.5 sacks. He had 7.5 sacks the previous year. He is a pure edge rusher. They like his kind of burst off the ball. They like what is called for pass rushers the bend, which means you see that in the NFL all the time. When they do that speed rush and kind of duck under the offensive tackle, Umanmielen does that very well. But he is kind of a pure tools guy, a size, length, speed kind of guy. They say he is not necessarily instinctive, but that could be the kind of guy you want to bring in with the coaching of Aaron Glenn and the defensive side of the ball. Remember, we're talking about these young guys with upside. He could have some upside with NFL coaching. Here's the deal, though. I purely do believe that interior defensive line is the bigger need than edge rusher. Remember, we have spent first-round picks the last couple of years on edge rushers that I think are promising. Jermaine Johnson, who's working his way back from an injury, but has shown flashes. And then Will McDonald as well, right? A couple of years ago. And Will McDonald had 10.5 sacks. He really, I think, had a breakout last year. So I think the Jets already have 2 edge rushers who are young. So I think interior, despite the fact that they brought in Byron Cowart and Derek Nandi, I think that is still the need on the defensive line. But it is interesting that in round 3, the ESPN crew is mocking Princely Umanmielen. So I did want to give you a thumbnail sketch on him. But remember, I said we've been spending our first round picks recently on edge rushers like McDonald and Jermaine Johnson. A couple years ago, the Jets had, multiple first round picks. And it worked out pretty well, right? Garrett Wilson, Sauce Gardner, Jermaine Johnson. Now, even that, though, pales in comparison to the 2000 draft. We are now 25 years removed from the 2000 draft for the Jets. And these things happen in cycles. That's why I want to talk about it, right? There's the kind of long cycle that teams have. And back in 2000, the Jets needed to kind of reset the deck. If you remember, they had Bill Parcells at the time. He famously said, if you want me to cook the meal, you might as well let me shop for the groceries. I think Aaron Glenn and Darren Mosey are now kind of going to cook the meal together and shop for the groceries together. But I want to remind you what happened in the 2000 draft for the Jets, okay? They had 4 first-round picks, something that has never happened in NFL history, and you could say that they hit on definitely 3, if not all 4 of them. At number 12 overall, they drafted Sean Ellis, who had 73.5 sacks, was a Pro Bowler twice for the Jets. All Jets fans kind of remember Sean Ellis. Then the next pick, After that one interior lineman, they go and get an edge rusher. You remember him. John Abraham was their draft pick at number 13 overall. He wound up in his career with 133 and a half sacks, 13th all time. He was a 5-time Pro Bowler for the Jets. Okay. Then at number 18, you may remember this one. They drafted Chad Pennington out of Marshall in there. He led the Jets to then the playoffs in 02, in 04, in 06. So there was success right after this draft. I'm thinking the same thing here for Glenn and Moji. Let's say they get the offensive lineman. Let's say they get the kind of stud defensive lineman and a tight end to be a critical piece with this wave of free agency. Could there be success with playoffs in 3 out of 6 years? But listen, Chad Pennington, over 13,000 passing yards, 4th all time for the Jets. And really, he did have success. He was known as someone who got injured a lot, didn't have that rocket arm, but really processed well and kind of had that touch, if you remember Chad Pennington. And then at number 27, they also went ahead and got Anthony Becht, the tight end, who did service for us for a long time. And maybe we get another tight end in the draft this time around. Those 4 guys played a combined 49 years in the NFL, and they weren't done. In the 3rd round that year, they got Lavernius Coles, if you remember him, a wideout who played 10 years in the NFL in the 3rd round. And we're talking about how in the 3rd round this year could be another asset that is truly important. All I'm saying is that draft was an all-timer for the Jets, and we are getting ready for what hopes to be a kind of all-timer for the Jets this year. Given the situation, they are really kind of chefing it up, building a culture. Next week with the draft, I'll also tell you about why I think what they're doing in terms of the free agency signings, what they're doing with their cap space, really positions them to build it slowly and do it the right way. Thinking about all these young guys they're bringing in, thinking about these 1 and 2 year contracts and the cap space flexibility that gives them to go ahead and build in the right way. But that'll do it for this episode of Jets Latest. Remember, the mocks are agreeing with us here at Jets Latest, so you know that we are giving you the real. We're sifting through all the nonsense. It's not going to be Jackson Dart at number 7, okay? They're not necessarily going to go wide receiver early. These are things that make the back page of the papers. These are things that fantasy managers want because these are big names like Ashton Genty and Tet McMillan. We're going to continue to build it the right way from the inside out. Offensive lineman, defensive lineman, and then maybe a tight end. But keep an eye on Mark Andrews as well. I do believe that is pretty interesting. So check out this video. Like the video, subscribe to Jets Latest, and tell a Jets fan friend to tell a Jets fan friend. And if you want more from me, the spitting statistician Dane Martinez, I am the host of the FTN Fantasy Show over on Sirius XM channel 87, where we talk more than just the Jets. We do talk fantasy football, fantasy baseball, the NBA playoffs on the horizon. It doesn't matter. FTN is a great company with great sports data to help you win your leagues and win that cash. Have a great weekend, everybody. Hit me up in the comments. Follow me on Twitter or X at Spittin' Speeds. I love to engage with everybody here on Jets Latest. And next week, guys, it is the draft. And we are going to be locked in, getting you ready for the new era of the green and white. Have a great weekend, everybody. We'll see you next week. Peace.